Partners Innovation Fellows Program to welcome all of you. We're really excited to tell you about the program, and we hope the session is informative, interactive, and lively. So please remember to ask questions when our panelists are on, and not to forget to mention that when you ask that question, since the session is being recorded, please come up to the mic and ask the question so that the question can be heard and recorded. So to start off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Seema Basu. I'm a market sector leader at Partners Innovation Office. I'm responsible for enabling some of our strategic R&D collaborations with our industry partners and some of our new initiatives like the Innovation Fellows Program. To start this session, I'll give you a brief introduction and overview of the program so that you have the background and the context as you listen to insights, perspective, and experiences from our panelists, all of whom are participants and stakeholders in this program. Further, I do think that this forum, this year's topic, AI and healthcare, is an excellent setting and example to highlight why a program like this is a wonderful tool for all of our organizations to be more agile, to be able to bring on bright, smart people onto teams, in multidisciplinary teams in different settings to advance and accelerate healthcare transformation, new products, your projects. So if you are one of our industry partners, imagine a project in which, through this program, you can enlist a fellow faculty, MD, PhD from one of the partners' healthcare hospitals, trained here, experiencing research and patient care every day, to come on for a short term onto your project team to accelerate the project you're working. At the same time, if you're a fellow in our system, think about this where you can be part of a different kind of team, contribute, but learn at the same time in a different setting, get exposed to a different team-based approach, a different project from what you might have learned and trained at the hospital. So we developed this programmatic approach last year, and partly we were learning and building off some examples we've had in the recent past. But we decided a programmatic approach will allow us to actually scale the program and make it accessible to the breadth and depth of people that are there in organizations within the partner system, whether that's Brigham, Women's Hospital, MassGeneral Hospital, McLean, Spalding, and others. And also to the breadth of the industry partners who make up the healthcare sector, whether you're a venture capital, you're a digital health company, a consulting firm, a payor, a biopharma, a device company. So we think this allows that, and we want to tell you more about how you can participate. I'll pause here for a moment to introduce that as we develop programs, it's really critical to facilitate this, have program management. And Carrie Mazzoni sitting up here, she's our ABLE program manager implementing this program, and we're happy to answer. She'll be happy to be here a little after the session to answer any questions you might have. Also, I don't know if Steve Linseth is in the audience. Steve? But he's another person working closely with us to introduce this program to a lot of industry partners. So this program, again, think of it, it's an opportunity for personnel exchange. It's a secondment for a short time. Think of it in two forms. We have an outbound and an inbound. For us, we call it outbound when one of our staff, fellows or faculty, seconds and goes on a short-term project into a host industry site to work on an industry's project. We call it inbound when an industry partner sends one of their employees and staff to come into our centers of excellence or our academic labs, again, on short-term, 6 months to 2 years. It works, depends on the project and the industry sector and the person and the individual to work on a project. So we worked and kickstarted the Outbound program in last year. And currently we have about 8 hosts, industry host partners, and about 8 fellows currently in 2018. And that's growing fast. We're now currently focused on developing the nuts and bolts and processes to scale the inbound, which is having industry staff come embed in our academic centers. So I'll just highlight again for the fellows, potential new fellows in the audience, whether you're from industry or from academic, whichever direction you go, what you will get is an experiential opportunity to learn and contribute through project and mentorship from industry or academic partners and faculty. For the host industry partners, you get a chance to enlist a subject matter expert, be part of the ecosystem that is involved in training, influencing, and mentoring the next generation of healthcare leaders. So with that, I will stop here and turn it over to our panelists to first introduce themselves, who they are, and how they intersect with the program. And then I'll facilitate and start with some questions for them. But we welcome you to ask all the questions so that you understand the what, the why, and the how of the program, and how you may see yourself, your organization, and your project be part of this program. Paul, shall we start with you?
Sure. My name is Paul Anderson. I'm the Chief Academic Officer, Senior Vice President of Research and Education at Brigham and Women's Hospital. In my role, I'm responsible for overseeing the academic mission of the hospital, so that is research and education. And we see the Innovation Fellows and Innovation Scholars program as really integral to this mission on both of these fronts. So we've been involved in sort of pushing for this for a long time. We've worked with Seema, Carrie, and Chris Coburn on trying to launch this program, and we're incredibly excited that the program is now off the ground. We're very excited that there's so many people here to hear about this, and it's something we'd like to expand and really sort of grow over the next few years.
Hi. Hi, my name is Raolat Abdulai. I am a physician, and I'm an associate director in the respiratory autoimmunity and inflammation unit with AstraZeneca. I'm actually a former fellow of this program, so I'm here to tell you about the benefits of the program and my experience over the last couple of years.
Hi, I'm Valerie Humblet. I'm the head of research and development at Collagen Medical. We're a small pharmaceutical company in the Boston area, and since October, we're hosting an innovation fellow.
And I'm Nathalie Agar. I'm an associate professor of neurosurgery and radiology at HMS and at the Brigham. And in this program, I serve as one of the 5 partners, wide mentors to our fellows who go into industry.
Great. So I'll kick off by asking a few questions to get a little more into the depth of their experience to share with you. And then please feel free to ask questions at any time. So Paul, to go back again to the organizational perspective, how do you see this as fits our mission or creates value where we are today in healthcare and as an academic medical center?
Yeah. Well, Seema, as you know, as a major academic healthcare system, we traditionally have a tripartite mission. We're interested in excellence in patient care, medical research, and medical education. Within this tripartite mission, my role as Chief Academic Officer puts me really in the center of 2 of those missions, the research and education arms. And so, as I said, I see the Innovation Fellow and Innovation Scholar program is really addressing each of these in extremely important ways. We are very fortunate at our hospitals to have physician scientists who are taking care of patients and also are involved in understanding mechanisms of disease. So they're interested in doing research in disease mechanisms. They have access to patient samples. They have access to tools and resources which have been put together by the Partners system, including the Partners Biobank, which puts together clinical resources, genetic resources, genomic resources, together with the partners' Big Data Commons, which links that biobank information to patient information in the EPIC electronic medical record, which has been modified to facilitate interaction with researchers, linked to pathology, radiology, laboratory studies, et cetera, in a way which is queryable and a way which can help them identify patients to answer their particular questions. So these investigators really have an opportunity to learn something very fundamental about these diseases, to identify new mechanisms of disease, new targets for drug development in a way which is very difficult to do in other institutions. Once we identify a potential target for a disease therapy, the next step of taking that target and actually developing a new medicine to help a patient is quite formidable. And in fact, that's not something we're particularly skilled at, not something we have a lot of experience with. Fortunately, across the river from us in Kendall Square, we have almost every major pharmaceutical company, all of the biotech companies, all of the venture capitalists who are in a frenzy of activity trying to make new medicines for patients that will really change the natural history of disease. As an institution, we feel that partnering between academic medical centers and industry partners is really critical to bridging this gap between identifying a target and developing a new medicine. So we're extremely excited about that process. In fact, most of our research is funded right now by NIH, about 55%, and only about 15% is funded by industry partners. Our NIH funding has been fairly flat over the last 10 years and is kind of out of our control. Our industry funding has actually been growing over the last several years in an area where we're putting a lot of intention into growing. So we're developing programs to try to promote this industry-academic interaction to make it more easy for us to partner with our industry collaborators and actually move our discoveries into the development of new medicines for our patients. So we do believe that the Innovation Fellows Program, which is our outbound program, and the Innovation Scholars Program, which is the inbound program, are really central to this mission. Clearly, the culture of our academic system is a bit different than the industry or biotech culture. And anything we can do to make both sides more comfortable with each other, we think will advance our mission of these academic industry interactions. So we would love to take our fellows, put them into companies, biotech or VC, to have them learn the culture, talk to the people, become familiar with them. Similarly, we'd love to take people from industry, VC or biotech, and implant them into our institutions. A lot of these companies now are actually de-emphasizing some of the preclinical investigation, but the idea of having a partnership between a person in industry who sits in one of our laboratories and has a circle of academic industry collaborations, I think is very attractive to a lot of companies, certainly attractive to us. So part of our mission is to really break down barriers of communication and culture to make it easier for these two sides to work with each other. And we think that this program is actually really a very exciting way to do that. So we're incredibly excited about having this program launched.
Great, and thank you, Paul. And I want to say, unfortunately today, one of our panelists, Harry Orff, who's Paul's counterpart at MassGeneral Hospital, had a family emergency and could not attend. But Paul and Harry are completely aligned on this vision, and this holds across partners leadership, including Ann Klebanski. And I will say, as Carrie and we created this program, it was important for us that our steering committee had Paul, Harry, and Ann on that to guide the program, to evolve it as we learn from our industry partners and from our fellows what works well and how best to scale and grow. So at this point then, I have a question actually for you, Nathalie. As a program mentor, and as your experience as being somebody who's a researcher and trains students and fellows all the time, how do you see your role? How do you see this as important for those faculty and junior faculty and fellows who are trying to straddle the world of academic and what they learn in industry, and play a role in influencing medicine of tomorrow by straddling both. How has your experience been? How do you see this work?
Well, I have to say, as a mentor, I find that my role, it's my favorite role in this whole program, is that I think it's a very privileged role where we first get to basically match fellows who are applying to the program with the right industry, which is something that I very much enjoy doing. But then after that, it's to be able to follow up with the fellow who's basically still attached to the institution, but in a more neutral way than let's say the PI of a lab would be able to act with that fellow. So when we take on some fellow through this program, the mentorship is truly dedicated to finding a good match with the career goals of the fellow and their training versus my own self-interest of building my lab bigger and better. So typically when things go well, you don't hear too much from the fellow, but then I do think these types of mentoring programs are extremely important, especially when little roadblocks come up. And oftentimes, if a fellow is left alone with a roadblock, let's say in the industry or in any other type of environment, they can eventually like grow that problem as if they have somebody they know they can go to who's very neutral in the whole system. Then all of a sudden we can sort it out and figure out solutions, or figure out that actually it is not such a big problem after all. So I very much feel fortunate to have been pulled into this program, and especially early on as we're trying to develop and move into the next phases of it.
And I will reiterate that it's really, currently we have 5 mentors, and not only are they mentors to the fellows who are straddling career skills development between learning things in academia and industry, but also to us as we're evolving the program. They are our peer faculty who can really help say what direction this grows and what works well. Nathalie, do you also maybe want to, I know, as I mentioned, our outbound, which is our faculty and fellows going to industry, is the one which we've kickstarted and is growing and well on its way. We're still scaling the inbound and defining a lot of things. Well, in your perspective as being one of our academic labs into which you could see an industry fellow coming in and spending some time, how do you see the value for you, for the fellow, for the industry partner?
Well, this part of the program gets me really excited in a very selfish manner, is that I do think companies who are trying to find solutions to better healthcare typically will put boards of experts and put them in a room and say, this is the problem, let's find a solution. But working with a lot of trainees, engineers, scientists, once you bring those people into where the problem is that needs a solution, then everything starts happening very organically, rather than in isolation, let's say in an instrumentation development company trying to develop the best tool to figure out that once you bring it on site, the button should have been on the left versus the right, or instead of doing, I think it could be a very good attractive model for the companies to send their people to really experience hands-on what our limitations are in treating patients and to be creative about finding solutions. So I very much look forward also for this part of the program.
And again, for this part of the program too, we have some experiences we're building off, but we're really trying to scale it to where we have individual labs that people could come into our centers of excellence. We have many of those. And again, this applies to the industry segments across board. Where you're a VC firm, you could come in and help some of our more translational centers think more commercially about their projects. Or you are from a large pharma, you can come and help translate and build some tools that are required for translation of some fundamental research. So we again see this applicable to whichever industry segment you are in. So maybe a question for Valerie next. So Valerie's from Collagen Medical, and they're one of our industry hosts to one of our fellows. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you chose to become a host and what was your experience? And so far, it's an ongoing, what was your value?
So being a very small company, funded entirely through NIH grant for industry. We had the need for hiring someone who could fill up multiple positions because we had a budget for maybe, a quarter time of a chemist and another quarter time of someone that would help with regulatory process. And the fellow program allows us to host someone who's highly qualified, very motivated, and is willing to learn all the different things that you're doing in a company. Being a small company, there's no way you can only do one thing. So I think it's a great match for both of us because our fellow has the opportunity to see really the everyday life of a pharmaceutical company, and she can get involved in the different process. So that has been so far a great experience for us.
Great. In Collagen Medical is a smaller company, and we want to highlight that it works, allows them to be nimble, but it also works. Some of our hosts are the larger pharma companies or VC firms. And like I said, the beauty of this program is we have such breadth and depth of talent, people, passionate people wanting to learn new things, apply their skills, that it works for many different partners. And I don't know, is anyone from Third Rock here? Hi, so maybe you're one of our participant industry hosts. Do you want to add to that?
Add to?
A comment to your experience?
Yeah, sorry. So it's been extremely valuable for a learning opportunity.
Can you go to the mic, sorry?
It's been a great learning opportunity for people who've come in, fellows that have come in and really been able to see how biotech thinks about products that are being developed in labs here on the academic side. And so far we're just starting the program, but everybody that has been through it has said that they've learned a lot on how to operate within a company and just things that they would have had no idea without having the experience.
Thank you very much. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. So, question for Raolat. Raolat's one of our, like I said, we're building off some of our early experiences, and Raolat was one of our earlier fellows. Can you tell us what motivated you to be that, and what skills you learned, and how did it influence your career and path you are on right now?
Well, great question. So before I start, how many fellows are in the room right now? Fellows or junior faculty? Okay, there are a few people. So I think the Innovation Fellowship is actually a great way to improve your repertoire of skills. It's a skill that you're not going to be able to develop as a fellow, just being a clinical or even just a research fellow. I was initially approached about the fellowship from my mentor, Bart Celli. Initially I was like, I don't know about this. Don't get me involved. I'm just trying to finish my fellowship, just minding my business. But I took a visit to AstraZeneca's site in Waltham, and I presented some of the research and interest I've had, and I talked to the people. And I found that they were very, very interested in making sure they had evidence-driven science and evidence-based information. And so I was motivated to go ahead with the fellowship because I wanted to be around an area where they were doing new things in the development of asthma and COPD drugs. I was very interested in especially COPD, which is almost like a pre-malignant disease given the severity of it. And so as I started my fellowship, it was quite an experimental time because it was back in 2015, so I was one of the earlier fellows. During that time, I was both mentored by a mentor at AstraZeneca as well as one at Brigham, Dr. Celli. And I split my time between the hospital as well as being basically a medical director on a project. Initially, it started as one project, and it went on to maybe 2 and 3 projects, which was great. And as a medical director, you are one of the people who determines what patient populations you'll assess a drug in. You'll determine how you build your program, what endpoints will you use. You'll work with your colleagues to devise a biomarker strategy and a personalized health strategy. So these are all experiences you will never really be able to get as a fellow based primarily in the hospital. And it actually provided me with skills that are very useful today, because I did end up, after 2 years, joining AstraZeneca. And it's been great. It's a multinational company, so the one great thing, non-science thing, is that you meet people from all over the world. And your colleagues aren't just based here in the US, but they may be in Sweden, they may be in the UK, Germany, et cetera. So it's actually a way to develop not only your interpersonal skills, but also your management and leadership skills. As fellows in the clinic, yeah, we may, or even in the hospital, you may manage like an intern or a resident, but when you are part of a team that includes clinical pharmacologists, toxicologists, et cetera, it's a different dynamic. So it's been a great opportunity.
Right, so I think Raolat's really highlighting that when we go from academic to industry to a much more team-based approach,
Yes.
It's great exposure. And I will take this moment to say that from our fellows that Carrie's starting to track as to where they end up with their choices, their career, using these new skills and the experience. To date, we've had more come back and be in academia. But what they bring back is understanding how better, when in the future they will do a research collaboration with the industry partner, what does the industry partner do well? At what pace does it work? How do they take those decisions? And the more team-based approach is slightly different from how academic lab and fundamental science pace works at. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Raolat, she is at AstraZeneca, and that's also an outcome and a wonderful outcome, but it opens up the opportunity to make your career at either place, academic or industry. I'll pause here and see at this point, you've heard from all the panelists, and each one of them as a fellow, as a mentor, as an industry host, and as one of our fearless chiefs and leaders. When we embark on trying to do open innovation and forge new ways to impact healthcare transformation, some thoughts from you guys. Any questions for us? Sorry, please use the mic.
Hi, I enjoyed the forum very much. My name is Ali Al-Ubaidi. I'm a clinician and chief academic officer for Abu Dhabi Health Services in the UAE. And we have many fellows and residents who train outside. I guess this is different from the traditional type of training in terms of research or clinical training. So my question is, did you define the type of curriculum? I mean, it's of course different, it depends on the discipline, but is there, in the traditional sense, a sort of a curriculum that these fellows have to complete? Are there eligibility criteria, entry, so that there are some minimum standards for the trainees to pass? And on the industry side, I mean, we just heard that where the traditional medicine, evidence-based medicine, it may take 17 years for a clinical proof to make it to the clinical practice. I think this is great, where intelligence-based solutions could innovate and lead to faster solutions for the population. Is there a complementary, I mean, could the inbound and outbound, could it be complementary, so that for a fellow spend their time between industry as well as within partners? Thank you.
Shall I answer some parts of that question, and please add? So you had many questions in there, so let me take it step by step. So one of the things is, like I said, we'd had successful examples of this at many levels, because as Paul said, educating, training, the healthcare workforce for tomorrow is part of our mission. And I know Chris Olson is in our audience here. And whether that was for clinicians, the Center for MGH Global Health has always sent clinicians to resource poor setting for a little stint for their development so that they could see how they could maybe help there or bring back an innovative thinking of how to be more efficient with less resources. So that same kind of thinking went in here. But because you're not training them for a certain specialty, that's best done at the academic institution. There's graduate medical education guidelines. And so when Raolat was a fellow here, she followed a very structured, and as she mentioned, something that to get all that training, it is by default very structured. It is accredited, etc. This program, on the other hand, wants to create that flexibility of saying, now you've learned a lot. You're very capable. But the world today is very dynamic, the skill set. So how do you provide an opportunity to go? And our industry partners will vary from Third Rock, who's a VC firm, to Collagen, whose needs are very specific. The goal here is to have less requirements, but to do a better job of matching what the person or the fellow feels like they would learn a lot and contribute a lot, and to match them whether they want to go to a VC firm, whether they want to go to a large pharmaceutical company, and then pick a project that would interest them, whether it is to do real-world evidence-based clinical trial development, or is it to start companies, but what does it take to think about defining how to do a spin-off with Third Rock. So we left the requirements as very not education like a GME certification, more as open-based, experiential, learn by doing, being part of a team. So that's to that part of your question. Eligibility. So we gave that some thought. You know, as an academic medical center, you do have to finish your training for your credentials. So there are certain constraints. And also, we wanted to make sure that people are ready and understand what careers or what exposure they're looking for at that time. So the minimum, but again, design thinking, trying to put very few fixed elements. We left it as that if you're one of our MD fellows, you've at least completed your residency. If you're a postdoc, you've done a couple years of postdoc at one of our hospitals, so you have bringing that perspective of research within an academic medical center to our industry partners. Did that answer most of your questions?
Can I add to
Yes,
that?
please do.
So there's also, I know the Innovation Fellow program, they offer a Making Medicines module, which is also quite structured in terms of teaching you about drug development. And each company, I've spoken to other fellows, each company, they do have internal resources, education resources on drug development. So you do get formalized education during this period, not just doing work on clinical trials and drug development.
I would just add that typically these fellows come in post-ACA GME training. So they have that training done, and then they can go to the next step. In addition, I think our fellows know what they're interested in, and it's sort of a two-way competition. So the fellows are a pool for that year. Then there's the companies which are recruiting those fellows. And I think both sides sort of work together, come up with a curriculum which fits the needs of both of those partners. And that tends to work quite well with the kind of resources that you've talked about here.
And so that brings to where, you know, in a programmatic approach, we've only been at this for over a year. We're trying to build more tools. That might not be requirements, but optional add-ons like the one is an online tool called Making Medicines that Eli Lilly donated to our program. So any fellow of ours who's interested in that can learn. So it's a didactic learning. Also, unlike smaller companies, but larger companies often have in-house training. And one of the things that all our fellows and all our conversations with these larger companies, when they come in, well, besides working on the project, just like their own employees, they would have access to some of those didactic training and program that happens at these companies. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Sharon Claude. I'm from BristolMyers Squibb. I'm just curious, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for in terms of the inbound scholars?
So as I said, we've had a few experiences, and we're trying to right now garner what are the needs for different centers for us and different labs. So for sure, one is experiences and people from industry that might come in because either they want to learn some because the company is trying to grow into a new field, let's say neuroscience. Maybe they want to come into some of our neuroscience labs. Maybe they have postdoctoral programs at these larger companies that want their postdoc to get some more training in a cutting edge new field, work with some of our leader investigators in specific labs. And Nathalie could maybe speak more to that. We'll also have a few centers of excellence, whether they're focused on different things. Again, I'm going to call on Chris Olson's center is focused on how do you develop technologies that are sustainable and productizable for resource board setting. So maybe some of our industry partners who have faculty who maybe are looking for a little sabbatical to keep your own talented staff engaged. Maybe they want to come back to academia and maybe spend a little time working on projects like that. So that's giving you two kinds of examples that we would. Again, I want Nathalie to maybe say a little bit more on if somebody came into her lab, what would interdisciplinary would help some of your projects. If I didn't mention it before, I want to highlight a lot of our fellows, even when Raolat, all of them, it is individualized and a little customized for the project, for the company, for where they are in their career, but a lot of them continue to, it doesn't have to be full-time. So if it is 75-25 or 50-50, you're continuing to do some of your responsibilities either at your industry place or clinical duties here, but they're separate and you're going to also dedicate some time to this other project. Nathalie, do you for the inbound?
Yeah, I think we've covered, and I think we might all get the sense that in terms of technology development, drug development, the advantages for that, but I think one of the big advantages also is the people factor, is that once you have people start coming in and build relationships with, let's say, people in the lab or in the center or in the hospital, then after that it becomes like a point of contact that goes both ways. Once they return to industry where there can be, even if it's not a formal collaboration, or I think it tightens the network that can make for quite productive grounds for future work.
I'll echo that point again and again. Being from the Partners Innovation Office, and as Paul said, how do we both from mission and role bring people to closer that have different skills, work in different deliverables, but be able to bring it together so when a project needs, and fellows may go for training and for an experiential stint, but let's say they come back, our vision is they come back and let's say start an academic lab, they'll have built their professional network. They'll be able to understand better who to reach out to, when to collaborate, what are the strengths the different groups bring, and same for the company partner. You've built relationship at an organizational level. And Carrie and we're spending a lot of time now trying to make sure that the fellows have a network. So through LinkedIn, through being participating with us at an organizational level in events. So we're trying to create a network of fellows in really this ecosystem of the next generation. So we have a couple other questions.
I'm Lynne Eckert, and I'm a physician in the Partners system. Worked with healthcare Partners Healthcare International. The question I have, as I listen to this, it's very exciting what you're doing, bringing young people together and having them have mentors. The question I have is related to the fact that we have an extraordinarily expensive healthcare system, and recent articles are demonstrating that we don't have the best outcomes compared to other places around the world. So how do you bring the fellows and the faculty together on some of the issues that are economic or social that if you're bringing new products to market, how do you make sure that they're actually going to be utilized and cost effective? Those kinds of things. Are there any opportunities for people to be involved in those areas?
I can answer that. So that's a great question. So doing this fellowship actually allowed me to have a voice at the table. And I would bring up, as we're developing the different clinical plans for different projects, I would bring up issues regarding, is this not only safe, but also is this something feasible for the patient? Does a patient want to drive and have this done all the time? Is this something that will be feasible for patients who are lower income patients? So actually, it is very important to have us physicians who have been in academia to actually be in industry, so that way we can bring these issues up. Other issues I bring up, especially being a woman of color, is also, do we have patients in these trials that reflect those with asthma, which are usually African American and Hispanic? So actually, this program has allowed more diversity, I would say, in the voices at the table. So I do think it does fulfill that mission. And when there's a bigger group of fellows, I think you'll start seeing more of an impact. I think what happens is we get into the drug development programs really late, or later after many of the early studies have been done, especially when it comes to early clinical development. And so I think it is very good to have fellows especially come into a lot of these programs during the early phases, because that's what really determines what happens later on as the drug develops, to make sure you touch upon all of the issues you've raised.
And I'll just echo that again. When I say multidisciplinary, I definitely mean engineer and a molecular biologist and a clinician, but we also think this is fresh perspective, next generation perspective on thinking differently, thinking you still need to make a drug, and how do you still also think about access, cost, etc. Also from another way, when I said which industry partners partner with us in this program, we're open to in exploring and want to work with payor companies, consulting companies that might help our fellows who are interested in much more trying to understand what are the issues here and be able to maybe gain some skills and experience at understanding how those issues are framed, how might solutions come about. So again, the program is really open-ended, really trying to say, how do we bring different sets of people together so that everybody can expand their mind a little bit, learn and contribute, advance things, maybe raise some new possibilities and new ways of thinking.
I think to Seema's point, one of the really exciting initiatives at the Brigham recently is to try to re-engineer healthcare, so to have home healthcare. So we're having now trials in the emergency department where patients who come in with problems which traditionally would go into the hospital as an inpatient, such as deep venous thrombosis or exacerbation of COPD, and they're being randomized to hospital care versus home care. In the home care, they're sent home with various electronic iPad devices, et cetera, where they'll have visits by physician assistants or their doctors or their skilled nurses to actually figure out, can they get as good or better care at home than they could in the hospital? So this is really a re-engineering, and some of the entities that Seema mentioned, I think, would be very interested in understanding how that kind of a re-engineering of healthcare develops, and we'd be very open to that kind of input as well.
Perfect. So that's really inbound. We have so many, as you being part of partners know, so many, it is something that we think about all the time. We have our own initiatives, and we'll be so well informed and productive for industry partners to come in maybe through the inbound and work on some of those, and for our younger fellows to go out in the world, be at the table, as Raolat said, and maybe raise some of these points.
Hi.
Yeah?
My name's Tara Brady. I'm in the development office at MassGeneral. So my question is around funding. What is your funding model? How much does it typically cost to fund one of the fellows? And also, if it's funded by your industry partner, how do you sort of go against these regulations around data sharing and IP sharing?
Okay. Shall I?
It's probably yours.
Probably mine. And Carrie can chime in if I'm missing something. So again, I think as Paul said, we don't always have a lot of flexible funding because when it's our NIH funding, it's for specific projects, specific deliverables. So this program, when like Raolat went for the percent effort time, the industry partner reimburses us the salary and fringe for that fellow. So if it's for 50% of their time that they're spending at the company, that's what they reimburse us. And this helps in two ways. Because the fellow continues to keep some responsibilities here, disruption to their life, to their paycheck, to their insurance, everything is seamless. There isn't any. And it's consistent with whatever we would pay them. What exactly is that amount? Totally, again, is where the flexibility depends. You have a PhD, an MD, because they're being paid according to the ecosystem in our hospitals, and it would be the same. So it would depend on where they are in their career, how many years postgraduate, whether they're MD, whether they're MD, PhD. So the industry partner would reimburse that. Did I answer all your questions?
Data sharing.
Oh, so the data sharing. So that is a very good question, whether you talk about just data sharing, intellectual property, and with our steering committee, we were very clear that when we do this with our industry partners, when the project is on site at the industry partner and it's their project under their direction, all IP data is theirs. And there isn't this collaboration and exchange of data under this program and this project. Might be that we're working with the same company, or 2 years later, imagine if Raolat had come back here and I had wanted to start a collaboration, we would do it under a collaboration agreement, which we do lots of industry academic research collaborations, and we'll deal with data use agreements then. But the fellows program is different than a research or a data use collaboration. Does that resonate?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's
Yep.
Hi, my name is Connie Weissman. I work at an accelerator in Silicon Valley. So you mentioned that you work with industry providers and different stakeholders, but do you ever look at bringing in startups that maybe already are being incubated or accelerated in that type of innovation platform environment, bringing them internally, like to partners to maybe plug in, I should say, to something that you may be already developing? And so that's my first question. Secondly, are you developing only medicines, or are you looking at digital technology and looking at things for maybe population health management or patient adherence and compliance? Just curious about that.
So to the second question first, we're looking at the entire spectrum of healthcare. So the examples we have today is a medical device startup company and a larger pharma company at the table. But we have Third Rock, who's a VC, payors, consulting firms we're currently talking to. We want healthcare, the entire spectrum. We want to break that barrier, lower the barrier for people to exchange ideas, at least while they're in the learning, growth, skills development, career phase. So absolutely. We have more examples right now around drug development and device in company formation, but this forum, like I said, I'm excited. It is really, when I think of the advances that are needed in digital health data management, and this requires that convergence. And so it's an opportune time to have a tool and a program like this. Anybody else wants to add to that part of the question? So to your second part, you're an accelerator in those kind of questions. So I'm from Partners Innovation Office, and we work all the time in helping spin out companies. We have investigators who want to spin out companies. We have fellows who do, and they are part of a lot of the Boston ecosystem has a lot of accelerator space, and so we interact with them from our IP licensing. We have a small fund, so we certainly interact in that entire spectrum. This program per se is much more focused on personnel exchange, much more from a contributing, bringing in new thinking, bringing in teams. And so it is part of the continuum, but not necessarily focused on that.
But I would say that as an institution, we're interested in new models. So for example, we're working with one large pharma company, which is sort of scaling back its preclinical investigation in actually placing teams within our research enterprise. So we would have a leader plus maybe a couple of fellows who would sit within a laboratory in an area exactly commensurate with what they're working on. So this is a new kind of a model. We think this is potentially very, very valuable and a win-win. I could see this happening with a startup as well, where there's not a lot of money, but there might be an opportunity to partner with a inventorship kind of a situation to get something off the ground. So we're absolutely interested in thinking outside of the box in this area.
Yeah, Dave Peak, I work for Humana. Kind of similar to the question that was just asked. Have you guys considered anything around data and the role of data shared between payers and providers? And specifically, I know Seema is going to be speaking later on at this conference. She announced at HIMSS the Blue Button 2.0 initiative, which makes available Medicare records for 4 years for 53 million Medicare beneficiaries. And so there's a lot of opportunities for that data to be shared with providers and members. And if you guys thought about that at all for this program?
Well, I can bring up my experience. During this program, I actually also got a master's in biomedical informatics. And so I used the opportunity in the fellowship to work on a big data and big data sets that were available through the company to actually do part of the work. And so that was quite helpful. So it wasn't just limited to drug development. It was actually also looking at analyzing and evaluating big data sets, as well as how we can use those data sets to inform the drug development.
And I would echo that again. Depending on our industry partner, whether they are hosting or sending people here, we're interested in the entire continuum. But in terms of collaborating on other things of which might be research or looking at data to analyze, could also be part of, as Paul is mentioning, new models or industry academic research collaborations or consortium model. So as institution, we're open to all of it. In this program per se, it's not just drug development or device development. It is thinking of data, digital health, questions raised about parity and cost and all of it. So in as much as we have partners who want to have a personnel exchange, be more agile, bring people onto their teams as to bring in the more academic, clinical, bright minds or perspectives into whatever their project is, that's what this program is trying to enable. Lower barriers, simplify certain things, and allow our next generation to be a little more fluid in being able to go back and forth in all these different players and organizations.
I think along those lines, I would just add that, why would we be doing this? Is this in our best interest? We were very sad when Raolat left us and went to AstraZeneca. I started at Brigham 30 years ago as an intern, and I stayed. And when I tell young people that, they look at me like I'm some sort of an extinct species. If they're in one place for 3 years, they start getting nervous that this looks bad on their CV. They have to go someplace else so they can learn at each place. And certainly that's true. And our young people, they're asking for this. If we don't give them this opportunity, they're going to go someplace else. But in addition, I think as an institution, we have a long history of seeding major academic medical centers around the world with the clinical and research leaders. We're used to doing that. And most people come, they spend some time training with us, they might be a junior faculty with us, and then they'll move on to another opportunity, and that's good. Traditionally, that was been on the academic side, but more recently, it's on the industry, venture, and biotech side. And it's tremendously valuable to us. So when I'm looking at opportunities for academic industry collaborations, I can go over to Kendall Square and meet with 10 people who are former trainees or former faculty of us, who we were terribly sad when they left, but now I can partner with them and actually do things that I couldn't do otherwise. So that's incredibly valuable to us, and we really think that's a great asset to our institution.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, even though I left, I still keep in contact with all of my colleagues at Brigham within the partner system, and it's actually helpful because if there's a question on type of asthma, I'm like, aha, I know somebody, and I will go back to Brigham or ask someone within the partner system that I recall who's working on this. So there's always an exchange of ideas. And I think it goes back to what Seema was saying in the beginning. It does provide a larger network for the fellows. I've met some of the top researchers in respiratory as a fellow, and so some of these people I would not have met otherwise. So I think this fellowship has brought a great opportunity. And secondments are actually quite common in industry. They're not as common, I would say, in academia, but they're very common in industry. Someone wants to go from farm science or clin farm to working in regulatory for like a year, and that's very common. And actually, I think it would be very useful in academia because it may help with burnout. When you change kind of the pace of your work, and you also expand your skills. So I think it's been a great fellowship.
And so it echo both the things that Paul said, right? Think of this as an ambassador. Think if you have kids and you've sent them to that wonderful summer camp where they're not only embedded and have that experiential, they come back with a network of friends. Like my daughter has friends from LA because of the camps, right? She's on the East Coast, she has friends. So you get that network, whether it is when you have a question, whether it's career-based, project-based. So you're creating that ambassador that in the long run is going to have the ability to reach the right people at the right time and to accelerate their projects, to influence where healthcare is, and to really have a network that's robust and break down the silos a little bit. And to Raolat's point, academia has certain constraints, right? Flexibility of the funding that's come, or the non-flexibility of some of the funding, some of the training, because they have very rigorous requirements. If you're a cardiology fellowship, you hardly have time to do anything else. So you have to finish X amount. And the whole point of this program is to be able to help lower some of the barriers that when you're done with that, can we help? Can we, as organizationally, help facilitate for you to experience other things so you can grow your own skills, maybe get exposed to other career paths and people in different settings, like Raolat did at AstraZeneca.
I'd like to add
Yeah,
one thing
please.
here in terms of the place where I see the value of having those mentors across the system that are not necessarily attached to the fellow with their own investment into research is the ability to encourage the fellow to explore what would my career look like in industry versus in academia, but provide some very neutral ground to have those discussions with the academic hat wearing. So if it was my fellow, my most talented fellow who goes and spends 2 years in industry and I have all those projects to finish, I think I might have a more biased view in trying to truly let them do their best match for their career. But in the long term, I agree, like being able to basically let them go is fertilizing even more ground that eventually, but it's in the bigger picture. So I think the role of the mentors in this program can provide these types of discussions that are not biased, if you want.
And that's a really good point. That was a deliberate reason to build the mentorship into the program, because we are talking about younger folks. We are talking about an evolving career landscape, and to not have that direct supervisor be the only mentor, but to also provide somebody who's thinking really as part of this program, what are the things you're trying to maybe in a safe way nurture the fellow to go experience, use that opportunity, and then reflect as they think back about what is it they want to do for the next 5 years. We won't say for the rest of their life, but next 5 years. So I think that was really important, and I will use this opportunity to say, besides that, we have 4 other mentors, and we try to, and we will grow them as the program grows. We'll have more, but for now we have 5, and they come with different backgrounds. So besides that, we have Mason, who himself in his earlier years in his career left academia to go to industry and work there for 2 years. So he brings that perspective of having been as a working employee at different academic and industry settings. I myself, I was a Drosophila, I got my PhD in a Drosophila genetics lab, and didn't exactly know what I was asking because I was young, but I said, what does industry R&D look like? And I bumbled my way into a pharma company R&D. And that experience definitely today helps me in what I do in my role. So you don't know where your path takes you. If there are some opportunities that are there, some mentors along the way who make it feel safe and encourage you to think more broadly, and for you to both learn and contribute, so it's value to the whole ecosystem, your partners who are looking for immediate needs, but it also gives you an opportunity to think broadly. So that's really goes back to Paul said, our mission. How do we treat patients, educate the next generation to treat patients, and do research to make better drugs? So it brings it all back together.
And if I can add, I think for the fellows, it's a great opportunity to have their first experience in the industry, which is always the hardest to get, because there's this big hurdle that the industry will always hit you, but you want to leave academia, but you don't have any industry experiment, and the first one is the hardest to get. And here you get it in sort of a safe way, because you can always decide, I thought I would like industry better, but I really like academia. And you can decide after that, okay, it's a great experience, I learned a lot, I increased my network, but I want to stay in academia. It's not, you don't have to cut the cord, like, okay, I'm leaving academia for good, I will be in the industry. So it's a perfect time to really figure out what you would like to do.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that's a great point.
Excellent.
That's a great point. It's like a stepping stone. It's an in-between. It allows you to explore. And you're treated as a fellow. The goal is to educate you, which is different than if you were just an employee. And I think that's the best thing about the fellowship. And also, people don't realize that it's not always easy to get an industry job. Many positions you do want experience, especially in larger companies. They do want you to have some kind of background and experience. And for people coming out of their fellowship or junior faculty, it may be harder because you don't have that experience working on clinical studies, because most of the time fellows and junior faculty don't get to be the top person on an ongoing internal trial in academia. So it really provides you with experience, and I think that was invaluable. And so when I finished, I was looking at both academia and industry, and suddenly it was like, whoa, there's so many opportunities across a range of different positions, and so that really opens the job market. So that's one thing, the strength of this fellowship.
So we have about 10 minutes left. Any more questions? Yes, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Noy Kaufman. I'm a student research fellow at the NIH, and I'm also applying to medical school right now. So this is more kind of not about the program question, but for you as mentors. How important do you think it is to start this innovation training and gaining this perspective and think this entrepreneurial and innovation, to have this innovation had as for future physicians, for medical students, and really start this early on rather than just like after you get your MD?
Maybe Paul and Nathalie can talk to it first. Yeah.
I think for innovation, you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. which basically means to be able to go from your comfort zone into something new. And this is what this program allows, and there are many different ways to do it. So I graduated with a PhD in chemistry, and then I did 2 fellowships with 2 different neurosurgeons, where it was pretty humbling. My first day once I graduated and I was a doctor, I had to have an undergrad or a grad student showing me how to look into a microscope because I had no idea. So it was extremely uncomfortable, but what I have gained by doing this is, to me, has been invaluable. So rather than staying in the lab and developing a tool and then to find an application to which I want to apply that tool to everything, which is sort of force-fitting things, then I've been able to integrate into the clinical setting, but with a breadth of experience that I think has contributed to our humble little successes that we've had along the way. So, and it's an era of time that seems to be very natural for your generation. I already feel like sitting up here, I'm in a different generation. I've been at the same place for a long time. But it's something that was extremely uncomfortable for me to do, or was seen as I would have been a rock star in the field I was in if I had continued there. But to be able to take that risk and look outside and think outside the box, you're definitely in a place, in a generation that can do that much more as easily. And I think it's great. Any opportunities, just keep your eyes open and don't be afraid to embrace. But still try to think this cliche question of where do I want to be in 5 years? That's a very powerful question. So it doesn't mean that you just go where the wind takes you, but if you know, like, this is what I want to do, then look at opportunities. How do they help you get to that next step?
I would say it's just important to know that this option exists, and that's why if we can have industry people in our laboratory, we have medical students, graduate students in the lab, and if they see somebody there and talk to them and understand that this is going on, I think that's very valuable. So that's one of the reasons why, again, we want to do this program.
May I have just one
Yes,
thing that I didn't know if it was appropriate to add it early on, but even though we've been working with fellows, now I can see how basically students or even the residents are getting excited about this. And in neurosurgery, where it's a very long residency, they have 2 years of research that now, talking to our residency program director, he also got quite enthused with the idea of sending the residents into companies that would make sense to train the residents into. So hopefully we can send them and take them earlier on, but then that's Seema and Carrie's mandate to make all of this legal.
And we're telling you about this program, so we're looking for you to spread the word about the program. The more industry hosts we have, the more lead time, the more strategic our partners can be with us. It helps us better plan as maybe departments because of guidelines for training, but if they could maybe build it into that. If we had an AstraZeneca say, well, fine, every year 2 of them can come, maybe then we can structure our fellowships to have that year, to give people who have that mindset of at least wanting to experience it, and then taking that time to reflect and say, that's not for me, and that's okay, right? So we just want to create avenues so that we can do that, and we need our industry partners to host with us, because that's what we want to do. We want to create some avenues for people to go experience things back and forth, and it's going to be exactly what this next generation of transformation of healthcare does need. And to your question, if you're curious, try it. It's a mindset, and you don't have to like it, and you evaluate every 5 years. And there's some fields and some things in your life. I tell my daughter, X number of years, you're going to have to go deep before you go broad and try something else. So it just depends on what field, where you are, but it's a mindset of how you innovate and where you think you need to be. Experiencing is always going to broaden your horizon. That's what I can say as a mentor. Okay, so thank you for being such a wonderful audience. I'm going to enlist all of you to be an ambassador for us and talk about the program to your colleagues, and we hope to hear from you. And thank you very much to all our panelists.